Hi everyone, welcome to the Edinburgh Splunk user group, December 2023. I'm Tom Wise, one of your hosts. Andrew, I need you to do the slides, but
I need to check.
is the audio being captured? Yeah, we're just doing some sound checks, so just give me a second. Sounds like it's coming through, yeah. Good.
There's like a 30-second delay that I put on with the stream, so it might take a while.
Good. Okay, so today's agenda, I'm going to talk a little bit about mission control. I know, not SOAR, but sort of SOAR. And Andrew's going to run through Splunk in 5 levels. And then, of course, we'll have any other business at the end of it as well.
Oh, it helps if the presentation was on. There we go.
It would help if the presentation was on. Yes, well done. Okay, so today we're covering mission control, Splunk in 5 levels, and then any other business at the end as well. So Andrew, you might not be able to see him. He's just going to wave his hand at the moment, but you will see him towards the end of the second half of the video. He's the co-leader, works for Lloyd's Banking Group, and then there is me, Tom Wise. I work for Adama, who sort of hosts the user group in person, and I'm one of the engineering leads here at Adama. Been using Splunk for 7 years. So today we're going to have Andrew and me speaking. I think it's me first. I don't know where Andrew's picture went on that, but you are now a ghost apparently, or a vampire, whichever way you want to see it. So as I said before, I work for Adama. We are the local sponsor here of the Edinburgh Splunk user group. We're the largest Splunk delivery partner for the UK. We've won plenty of awards with them. We do consultancy, managed service provider. And as you can see here, we hold multiple statuses, although we might have to change these badges because all the Partner Plus stuff is now a bit old, and it's more about motions and other badges and stuff like that. But anyway, we're still at that sort of level.
That's for the new year to sort out.
Yeah, new year, we'll sort that out. New slides for the new year. Obviously, please be aware that this is being recorded, and the video will be made available publicly after the user group finishes on the YouTube page. If you do discuss topics, don't mention confidential information or anything you don't want to be made public, because it will be. Obviously, don't identify clients. I mean, obviously we won't, but we're used to talking here. But if you do want to talk about work you've done or ask questions, etc., then just don't mention specific clients. Again, unless you are happy for it to be made public. So just a few little house rules. So the overall goal, right, is to create authentic user group experience. Technical discussions primarily, inclusive environment. There is no such thing as a stupid question. No knowledge is assumed either. So if you do want to ask any question, again, please do. You've got the right people in the room to answer that question. And we're led by the technology. So there's no salesy stuff here. We're not trying to get you onto Splunk or mature your Splunk capability. It's primarily based on the kind of techie, nerdy, geeky stuff that we want to show you. So, without any further ado, we shall get on to Splunk Mission Control, which is the new shiny, although it's been talked about for a long time. So let's get into the weeds. Just make sure I keep track of the time.
Do you want to be on, or do you just want the slides up?
I don't mind. I don't mind if I'm on all the slides. Whatever's better for the people on the other end of the thing. Okay. Okay, so Splunk Mission Control. The slides will refer to it as MC, but I'll try and keep calling it Mission Control throughout the slide decks just to save space on characters. So Splunk Mission Control has been in development now for many years. Conf 19, I think, was the first time that I personally heard about it. That was the first conf that I actually attended, though, so I wasn't sure if it had been talked about prior to that. But a little bit of history is that actually Mission Control was a Splunk SOAR page or location. When they adopted or when they bought out Phantom, Mission Control was actually the main kind of analyst page where you were doing event work from. They quickly changed that to analyst view, and then they took the Mission Control phrase for like their next kind of single pane of glass mythological unicorn. So it was only just recently released though properly in 2023. At the moment, the product is only available if you are a Splunk Cloud customer with enterprise security. So if you've got ITSI, I don't think you get Mission Control, it is purely just enterprise security, but it might be ITSI soon because it does work on notables, and I believe ITSI now uses notables. There is no definitive date at the moment for on-prem release, but I think the kind of documentation and stuff said probably within about a year of the GA release for on cloud, they're going to do it on-prem. But as I suspect, there's a lot more kind of the tricky security things to do when it's on-prem because you might need to connect it to your cloud instance, etc. So Mission Control is an app on the Enterprise Security Search Head. So it's now an app. When it was originally envisaged, it was meant to be this kind of singular or standalone thing that you would integrate with. Just like having an extra Enterprise Security Search Head, you would have something Mission Control-y. But now it is basically just an app on that ES Search Head. Provides a single location for security operations for both case management and SOAR automation. And obviously it leverages some of the enterprise security capability to populate the actual events that come through into Mission Control. Next one. So how do you access it? Again, good news, it's free to ES customers only. So if you've already paid out for enterprise security in the cloud, then you get a nice little Mission Control app. Again, it's accessed in the same way that you would access any application on the Splunk platform via the apps drop down. Select it. Now, when you actually go into it for the first time, you do have to activate it, and there's a reason why that you actually have to press that button. Once you press the initialize, or I think it is initialize, or it might be activate button, because Mission Control has a big reliance on SOAR, you actually get a free Splunk SOAR instance provisioned attached to your Mission Control, but it's the community version Splunk SOAR. So if you do download the community version now, for example, to your on-premise, then you would get 100 actions per day limit, but you would be able to use it for as long as you want at that 100 actions per day. But because this is now in the cloud and because Splunk are hosting it, they spin you a free version up for 6 months. And in the actual one of the tabs on Mission Control, it'll actually tell you what date that ends at. So as soon as you initialize it, you get 6 months usage of Mission Control, well, Splunk SOAR, in the background. But after that 6 months, that dies. It just deprovisions, basically. You can still interact with Mission Control outside of SOAR, but it's obviously better to have SOAR in the background because then you can interact with it from Mission Control. So I'm going to just kind of go through some of the pains, like, the views, I guess, within Mission Control. Now, a lot of it will look pretty standard. And you'll see a few slides later that show you that the ES kind of incident review and Mission Control review aren't too dissimilar. But what you'll notice on here really is you've got Mission Control IDs. Now with Mission Control, you get two IDs. There's the human readable one, which is this MC dash and then a number. But there's also a hash value that you can use if you're using the API, etc. as well. But this is more human readable. You've got the name, obviously, of the event. Now, at the moment, it's just notable events, and that's really what it's geared up to do, unless you use SOAR, but I'll talk about that in a sec. So you've got the name of it, you've got any description of the event, obviously associated metadata, and then you've got all these extra fields here. Obviously, you might notice, although it is truncated, you've got, I'm not pointing at it on the video, I suspect, but the disposition field is obviously an enterprise security field for notable events, which is why it's actually been added as a default field now. When I used to do a lot of SOAR stuff, we did used to use kind of disposition as a custom field in SOAR as well, because it did map to enterprise security. And then I'll talk about terminology a little bit later as well, although I don't think I added this one on. I don't know why I'm pointing at it. But you've also got incident types. So whereas in SOAR you would have a label that would dictate what automation runs, in Splunk Mission Control you actually have incident types, which is a little bit different. Again, there is a terminology switch.
I've just made it larger so people can see it.
Good, okay. But yeah, obviously all those fields are either manually editable or you can update them using the automation, and I'll talk about how you do that a little bit later as well. Next slide. So this is the initial view. So this is actually called the summary view of a Mission Control incident. So as you can see here, it's basically got a lot of the enterprise security fields. So here, in the user fields, you can see we've actually utilized the assets and identities. These are just the demo ones as well, so there's nothing here that you shouldn't be able to see. You've also got the ability to obviously do assets and identity stuff here. Also risk-based stuff, so you'll see the user field actually has a risk score next to it as well. So that comes through into the event. There are also, if you push risk-based alerting events through to this. Like, for example, the MITRE attack techniques over 7 days risk notable. Along the bottom of this page, you also get a MITRE heat map as well to show you the tactics and techniques used in over the course of those 7 days. Because with risk-based alerting, I don't want to deviate too much, but you kind of compact a bunch of alerts into one, and then every 7 days, it'll ping if you've had multiple tactics and techniques deployed. But again, this is called the summary view. This is generally the first thing. Now, when this creates something in SOAR, because it does, when you create this, it does populate a container in SOAR. This is what will be added as the initial artifact to the actual container to enable automation to be run. You've also got this kind of info over the side, which, again, just provides you that metadata capability. Also, you can view historic recent activity for this notable event, and also you can go directly to Splunk Enterprise Security to view the actual notable that caused this, or you can view container, which will then take you into Splunk SOAR and show you the actual container that's been created in SOAR, but for this event. So, and I'll show you a flow in a minute as well of how it works, so you'll understand that a bit better. I just wanted to show you all the different screens for now. So, next one. So response templates, again, if you've used Splunk SOAR before, you'll see that a lot of these are kind of similar, just different terminology, and I will kind of do a bit of a mapping later on as well. But a response template is basically a phased and task-based approach to your incidents. Now, you can obviously automate stuff still and still use response templates as well. Response templates are good if you've got kind of manual actions, or if you've got actions that may only need to be run under certain conditions, and you can embed them into these tasks. So as well as these tasks having a description, any associated notes to capture information relevant to that task only, you can also embed automation. You can attach files now to these, where you can't necessarily do that in Splunk SOAR. But again, you can have either one response template with multiple phases, multiple tasks, or you can generally, I would recommend having them as a single phase with multiple tasks, and then you just add them in as you need to throughout the automation. It just depends on the use case. And of course, everything can be updated via automation. So one major different thing, and I've kind of jumped to search before I go to events for a reason, but you can now, so previously, and even in Splunk SOAR, you'd either have to run the Splunk search through automation via an action, or you'd have to jump over to a Splunk server and actually run the search and do all the things that you need to do. Whereas now, when you're actually inside of the incident itself in Mission Control, you have a search window that you can leverage all of the functionality of search. As you see, there's nothing different on that screen that you would see in a normal Splunk search. The main thing, though, is that there is a different event action now. So on each event that actually comes up in your search, you can now add it to a mission control event or incident, sorry. And then it'll give you this nice little pop-up that says event added, open incident. The only thing that I find a little bit frustrating at the moment about this is that if you click this inside of this incident, it doesn't just automatically add it to events. You still have to select this event from a drop-down. But, maybe baby steps. Maybe next one they'll actually just go, oh, I know what incident I'm in. I'm just going to add the events straight to it. But it is a really cool feature. I do like the ability to search from within the incident because, again, either formulating an action to go and do a search or jumping onto another search head is not necessarily what you want to do, especially if we're trying to attain this single pane of glass myth that we've been hunting for many years. So it is a good improvement in my opinion. And the reason I sort of went to search before I came back to events is because this is the result of that action that I took there. So it seems that for at least most of the searches that I've done and the events that I've added in here, even if they're not in JSON format, in raw format, it does actually translate them into JSON objects. Now, I did one on the internal index when I was testing this yesterday, and it came through as raw. So I think maybe internal indexes aren't converted into JSON format, whereas any other index is. So just be aware of that. If you are writing any automation use case that needs internal index information to be used in the source side, then you'll need to do something on the source side to make it JSON. So this is the reason why it actually converts to JSON object, because when you create an event in Mission Control, it populates an artifact on the Splunk source side. But what I will also say is that even though it does that, it doesn't utilize the usual mechanisms of SOAR in that the artifact doesn't get a label and the run automation tag is set to false every time as well. So even though in SOAR you would be able to add an artifact and run automation just straight away, unfortunately when you send events from mission control to Splunk SOAR, it doesn't trigger automation automatically. A bit frustrating from my side, but that's fine. And also, I would just say previously you can add multiple events into that events tab as well, so you can run multiple searches. So if you wanted to do like more of a timeline, thank you. If you want to do more like a timeline of like this is when it was infected, this is when they laterally moved, this is when someone clicked a link, for example, then you could actually build that inside of this events pane. And then in the top right, you get this open events in search, and it just does this huge like append and join search to bring all of this together. But all it does is present it in the same way it's presented in here. Using mission control indexes. And then we get into the automation bit, the bit that's kind of a bit more closer to my heart. So obviously, as you can see here, the automation tab is limited, as in it's telling me that I have 100 actions per day and it's going to expire in 10 days, which is not very good, but you know, c'est la vie. And if you don't have the Splunk SOAR element attached to mission control, you won't get the automation tab, as you would expect. Also, there is licensing. So even though lots of users can use mission control, if you want them to both see and use the automation, they need to have a seat on SOAR. So even if you've got a nice big enterprise security license, you've got tons of people logging in there and using mission control, if they don't have an actual user account on Splunk SOAR, then they won't get even presented with any of the automation options, even in the response templates we saw earlier. If you embed the action, then they will either click it and it won't work, or it just won't be there. I'll be honest to say I haven't tested it yet, but someone inside Splunk didn't even know the answer to that. So it's something maybe I will test at some point. And just like in Splunk SOAR, right, you still get the ability to interact with prompts that come to you. You get the ability to run playbooks from here. You get the ability to run an action from here. Because remember, there is still a Splunk SOAR container that is intrinsically linked to this particular mission control incident. And then you can still see, in the same way you can in Splunk SOAR in the review pane, you can still see the action results and go in here and actually have a look. Although this is a little bit more interactive than the Splunk SOAR variant is. But again, it's still basically the same thing. You'll get all of the automation on the left-hand side. If you click into it, you will see all the results from the actual API. And you can see actually a difference here as well, which I like, is that you can download the JSON of that actual action being run as well. So just something, again, you get this for 6 months when you turn mission control on. Otherwise, you then have to license it properly. And also, if you are a partner, there are no NFRs for SOAR in the cloud just yet, or maybe ever. So just be aware of that. So coming from a SOAR world and seeing mission control, which is kind of just like a abstract layer of Splunk SOAR with an extra bit of funky case management added on the top. I mean, could have done it in SOAR, but anyway. There are a few other terminologies that you can get used to. So if you are from the SOAR world, this is what we call stuff. If you then mission control calls it this, and here's a description. And there was one thing that I realized I missed out earlier, and I'll talk about it on the end. So a container in Splunk SOAR was always called a container because, as I put in the description, it is the main container of all the items related to your that specific event's investigation or triage, right? In mission control, they're all called incidents. So even if it's not classified as an incident, everything inside mission control is classed or called an incident. But it is still the place where you work on and do all your automation, log all of your notes, etc. An artifact in SOAR is usually a element that contains IOCs or key value pairs, for example. In mission control, they're called events, as you've just seen on the slide before. But again, that is where you put all the indicators or all of the data, effectively, that you're going to want to use both in your investigation and potentially in the automation as well. A workbook inside of SOAR is what I showed you before, which is the response template. So again, a phased and task-based approach to security event lifecycle. And the other one that I forgot to put on here actually is the incident type. So in Splunk SOAR, it's called a label, and that label then drives everything that all the automation that comes off the back end of an event coming in. Whereas in Splunk, whereas in Mission Control, it's an incident type. There's also a really weird way, not a weird way, but a new way of defining what the incident type for an event is. You can actually set it on the fly. So there's a bit of SPL as you come into mission control, and you can do eval incident types equals, and then if you do like a case statement, you can actually assign them on the fly as well when events come in. So even if you've got a default label they come in as, the Splunk search will actually automatically work through that and apply the correct one, so that you get your proper incident categorization and naming. So the event lifecycle, so they're kind of two, right? Because bear in mind that mission control is free, but not every customer is going to want to purchase SOAR. It is expensive. It is great and can do awesome stuff, but again, it's not on the lower end of the cost bracket. So without automation, the general flow would be a correlation search, which is, for those of you who aren't aware, is basically a search written in Splunk Enterprise Security. It just provides some extra frameworks and options that you can do. But the correlation search will detect an issue. It will then fire a notable event and create a mission control event as well. And then obviously you manually investigate, or you do whatever you want with the investigation, and then you move to your incident resolution. So that's kind of your event life cycle at a very high level, with mission control without the SOAR element. And then, as you can see, the color's a little bit light there.
I've zoomed in.
You zoomed in, great. Thanks, Andrew. Again, very high level. There's a lot of intricacy in all of this stuff, especially development-wise. But again, it's the same kind of thing. Notable, mission control, investigate, automation utilizing Splunk SOAR, and then your incident actually gets resolved. So how you populate mission control. So primarily, out of the box, it is set up to receive notable events. So you don't have to have the Splunk SOAR bit, but if you don't have Splunk SOAR, then you will only be able to use notable events. So correlation searches will create things inside mission control, and it does that by utilizing the adaptive response actions. Now, I did try this earlier where it was just the mission control incident as the option, and it didn't create anything. So it does actually need the notable event element as well to synchronize. I believe it probably does some notable index searches or something for mission control. There are mission control indexes as well that store some data, but not a lot of data. So if you build your correlation search, you add all your MITRE annotations or other framework annotations like kill chain and a couple of the other ones that are there too, populate all the information, and then the minimum thing that you need for something to end up in mission control is fire a notable and fire a mission control incident, and then that's when you will see the synchronicity between the two. So I'm going to show you these two. They're pretty quick, to be fair. I was going to show them side by side. I don't know why I didn't in the end. But this is the Enterprise Security Incident Review pane. So these are all the ones I created within the last 24 hours. Again, as you can see, similar kind of metadata items there. And the next slide is basically the mission control one. So it really is very similar. And I do suspect in the future that there will be some kind of merging of the mission control element either into enterprise security, or they'll decouple or remove the enterprise security kind of workbenchy incident review stuff and move it into mission control. But for now, it is pretty much the same thing, apart from in mission control, you can utilize a lot more automation because you have access to SOAR, whereas if you're using enterprise security, you have the workbench for the investigations, but when it comes to automation, you're pretty limited. Apart from, if you've got a TA that has an adaptive response action, for example. But anyone who's used those versus SOAR, you have a lot more control and visibility when you use the SOAR platform. So one of the differences on the SOAR capability that's attached to mission control that you won't get on an on-prem SOAR instance is it actually now comes with a out-of-the-box mission control app. Now, there's a lot of actions that you see up there, but they're all really basic case management tasks. And in fact, pretty much everything on there I built in an app for Splunk SOAR for a customer's case management functionality too. So I'm glad to see that they've finally done this, because anyone who's used Splunk SOAR for a long time knows that the actual case management functionality in SOAR is pretty poor. Like some of this basic stuff like adding files, adding notes to tasks isn't easy to do in Splunk SOAR. So you can now automate basically all the incident stuff. And the reason why this actually is good is because you can create mission control events through the cycle that I showed you before. But if you want to have events, if you want to use it as a full case management system and have other events coming into it, then that comes in via your SOAR ingestion. and it doesn't then just replicate in mission control. So you will need to use a playbook utilizing this mission control app to create the incident, maybe add the summary or update summary in order to provide or remove summary fields if you want to trim it down. So you would have like the notable events in mission control stuff coming through enterprise security, no problem. But let's say you're ingesting emails for phishing, right? You're going to want to do that through Splunk SOAR, but then to make it into mission control, you're going to have that layer in between, which will utilize this this mission control app. And these are all basically case management functions. I think this might even be the last slide, actually. So what else has changed? So because you've got the linkage now between mission control and Splunk SOAR, and the terminology is different, as we saw before as well. So now they've got the ability inside of the actual debugger to run it either against an incident ID, which it'll then go to mission control, find that incident ID, and then run it against whatever's in there. Or it'll go into a container, which is the SOAR bit, right? The SOAR container where it'll hold all the artifacts. Which is good, I guess, again, because even though, like, if you run it against a mission control event, it'll stay in mission control. All of the results, all of the capabilities will be in there, which means that if you're testing, at least even if the person in mission control doesn't have a SOAR license, they'll still be able to see the results of your testing, for example. So at least you can collaborate on that potentially. Also, one of the biggest bugbears, I think, about when Splunk SOAR was originally released was that it followed the common event format for its fields. Obviously, you could still create your own custom ones and add seam ones. And in fact, there was even a conversion from seam fields to Ceph fields when you send events from enterprise security to Splunk SOAR. But now, because it's mission control, because it's going to be mainly notable events, they've actually changed it all now to sim fields. Obviously, I've just shown a small selection there. But even if you click one of these, what you'll find is that the actual data path in Splunk SOAR is still artifact.something. So it's different name, but still the same functionality actually in the Splunk SOAR side of things. So I think that was my last slide on mission control. Yeah. So I realized that was a quick fly by the seat of your pants introduction to mission control. In the new year, I will definitely be looking to put together a bit more of a full end-to-end demonstration, maybe on a very simple use case like blocking an account or something like that. But for now, hopefully that just wet your whistle a bit for mission control. Thank you.
Swap.
Which one am I clicking, by the way? You're on it already. Yeah. Good.
Hello. So a bit of a brief apology. We've not been on for ages. This was actually planned for when the university freshers would come in, because there are quite a lot of secure Splunk-focused courses going about in Edinburgh, and I assume hopefully elsewhere in Scotland. So the original idea was to have a session around September, but sadly life got in the way, and we've finally got around to doing a SUG today. So yeah, so this topic was sort of going to be a fun way to try to introduce people to Splunk based on like the 5 sort of levels that people tend to go through based on the actual cert qualifications that you have. So it was a bit inspired by this web series from the YouTube channel Wired. I think I don't know if they're actually in print, but they're certainly a big sort of tech sort of news website. One of my favorite ones is like one of the few ones that I've been able to see, but I love is there's
You won't catch it.
Try to point it out, but is there musician Jacob Collier explaining music theory to kids, then goes up to like a jazz musician, and they start talking about like semitonals, which I don't understand, but it's that sort of a trajectory from like, this is nice how music goes, and then into chords and fifths and to music theory at a university level, whatever. Anyway, the 5 sort of knowledge levels that I've got for Splunk usage and Splunkers is someone who doesn't know anything about Splunk. the stage show attendee. Actually, I'll describe each of these when we get round to it. But stage show attendee, someone who's looking at user power user certification, someone looking at admin, someone looking at architect, consultant, and then a Splunker, a Splunk Trust, or a Splunk staff member. This is all going to be a little bit in jest, so don't take this as the salt of the earth. Okay, so stage show attendee, you're just wondering about like a security expo or an infrastructure expo, and you stumble upon this big booth with a massive pony just floating about, and you're like, what's Splunk? If you're British, you're like, that's a bit of a dodgy word, but you get introduced to this data platform. Splunk is a platform that allows you to collect data, collect it into one place, and you can search against your data. You can use it to unlock your data using insights and visualizations. And you try to sell the product to whoever stumbled upon your stage, sort of like this. You show off, hey, I got this data, I can visualize it, I can turn it into like a map, or I can generate alerts from it using quite simple syntax. Next slide. You start off actually using the product, so you're a user at this point, or maybe a power user if you're a bit more into the infrastructure, learning about it. So you start to see that Splunk's actually a log aggregation system that uses its own syntax, SBL, soon to be SBL2, to integrate, interrogate, transform, and visualize data. I just caught something out the back of my eye. Various powerful options can be used to find values and events. All of these are in the Power User exam blueprint. So you learn all these techniques such as charting and time charting your data, tagging, making macros, writing sim, regexes, transactions, evals. Fairly basic sort of searches, but you're able to take like a web access log and be able to take out access status codes and then put it into like a nice chart to fire up to your CISO or whoever wants to see data. Next slide. I told you this is going to be quick because this is I did not put a lot of planning into this in the end. So admin, you've used Splunk for a little while. You've started to learn more of the intricacies about Splunk. So you start to learn that it's actually a series of components. It's not just like a monolith box that you just chuck data into. You can have components such as a forwarder, which can sit on sit on the server and send data into a Splunk indexer, and then your Splunk search head can search the data. You may not know how to architect that yet. That's the next step. But you at least know that all these components exist. You also know that you can download apps from Splunk base, or you can create your own, and you have a general idea of configuration files or .conf files. And you'd probably love to use the search knowledge manual, wherever all the .conf files live on that. On the Splunk website. I like just searching save searches.conf.spec, and it just takes me to the page because it's always the top results. You learn when you do admin that you can actually cluster Splunk together. So instead of just having a single search head or a single indexer, we can't really index heavy forwarders, but if you want more performance, you can scale horizontally and have other components essentially manage these. So you'd have your search head cluster and deployer manager, or your series of indexes and your indexing manager as well. And you can have a deployment server that acts as the clustering for your forwarders, which sends the like your apps or your configuration out to all these members. you also start to learn how to properly deal with events. So you learn how to do proper event breaking. You learn where to get your timestamps. You understand the necessity of sticking time zones in your events, and essentially you learn like the magic 6 that is required in props.conf for like successful ingestion.
I think it's Magic 8 now.
Yeah,
but-
well, magic 6 for 8 if you use universal forwarders, which people should be using, but people also can still use heavy forwarders. You might also learn that there's other ways to get data in, such as HEC or Splunk build apps like Splunk for syslog and Kubernetes. Next slide. Yeah, break fast speed because it's a bit wet outside and we want to go home.
Worried about trains being cancelled.
Yeah. So architect or consultant. So you've used Splunk a lot. You really want to get into the infrastructure. So you want to learn how it's actually put together. So you actually learn that Splunk is a log aggregation platform that can be architected to provide scalable, redundant indexing and searching of machine data. So this is where you get into the idea of, hey, I can have multi-site indexing clusters, which means you can have, if you were working on premises, it doesn't really matter on cloud, because that's done by Splunk themselves. But if you were making Splunk on-prem, you could have indexes that live on one data center and indexes that live on another data center, and then you can have a indexing manager be able to manage both of them by essentially replicating data across both sites. You can actually have a second indexing manager as of the latest updates to have DR readiness there as well. So you try to work out how to not have single points of failure in your architecture. Your platform is highly auditable, so you tend to learn about internal logs, audit logs, config tracker logs, Fishbucket if it was still logging to that index, but I've never actually seen logs in that index for ages. And you would essentially learn how to troubleshoot using those logs or hitting REST endpoints, which are, again, highly documented on Splunk.com, Splunk's documents page. And you also know that there's validated architectures that describe ways to set up Splunk based on your essentially requirements. So if you want more indexes, or like if you want an on-prem one for ES or ITSI, or if you want to hook in, I don't know if there's any SVAs for like if you want to store on-prem.
Yeah, so Splunk SOAR actually has its own SVAs. It is quite old, about 2.5 years old, and I believe there was an endeavor to get them updated, but yeah, they're probably not up to date right now.
Yeah, and also there also does exist the cloud solution, which a lot of customers are on now.
Moving to, definitely.
Yeah. I don't really know what else to add to architect consultants. You start learning about like the odd quirks about searches and things that you shouldn't do, and quick tricks like using T-stats just to check your data.
You need to know a lot more about data models and architecturally. Yeah, I think Andrew's already mentioned clustering, big thing. SSL as well, like how to secure all your comms. Like that's pretty, stuff that you need to know really well.
Certificate management. If you're using UFs, universal folders, to fire up into Splunk Cloud, you need to essentially learn how to manage that infrastructure, because like you could be deploying on a couple of servers, or you can deploying on every single endpoint in the on your infrastructure, and you have to ensure that that's working fine.
And when it comes to Splunk Cloud, obviously, all that architecture's just the forwarding layer on-prem, but then you've got to understand and decide whether you just send straight from UF to cloud, which is actually best practice, or whether you have some sort of intermediate forwarding layer, again, usually for egress point limits. But yeah, that's the sort of stuff you generally, especially if you're doing Splunk Cloud, you don't have to consider too much about the search and indexing layer, luckily, so it's all forwarding stuff.
And so, finally, and this is where the meme comes in, it's a t-shirt company. Splunk's a t-shirt company that makes t-shirts. I'm not actually wearing a t-shirt. I am wearing a conf hoodie.
I'm not.
But there's just this running joke that happens every conf for every presentation where all you see all the Splunkers wearing all these t-shirts, and I've got 3, maybe 4. In fact, like we have swag here with Splunk branding on it that we want to give away. And sometimes they make software to deal with the fact that they're a t-shirt company. But more seriously, you do have a vast wealth of knowledge, certainly with the Splunk Trust from Tom's experience being in it for 4 years now. And Splunk PS, I generally get on with when I chat to them.
I've done that too.
Yeah, and there's always stuff that I don't know that I can ask, and it'll be like, oh, that actually makes sense. For example, dealing with big KV store, and it hits the mem tables limit, and we're like, why does that affect KV store? Because it doesn't index the data. It's a MongoDB database, but PS in the infinite knowledge also believe that mem tables is a thing that you need to fix and for like massive amounts of data. There's always odd quirks, and have to sort of praise the actual experts in the room for when stuff goes wrong.
And let's be fair, I don't think there's anyone in the world, or if there is, I'd love to meet them, who knows everything about every Splunk product as well. So it's a vast ecosystem, portfolio, whatever you want to call it. So there will always be people who know something that you don't, and there will always be people who need to know what you know. So, obviously joining this is great, but please also get engaged in the community Slack. There's plenty of channels there, Mission Control, SOAR, ES, SC4S, I think, which Andrew mentioned earlier, which is the Splunk Connect for syslog. If you need to know anything about any Splunk product, there are people who actually care and want to tell you stuff inside the community. So definitely recommend you join in and get involved. I'm in there, so please come and say hi.
I used to be in there a lot more, but I moved companies and I don't look at my Slack as much anymore. But I still try to make an effort if there's a major issue that we have that someone will happily try to answer. Can't think of what else to say, really.
I mean, obviously, to get into the Splunk Trust, I guess, if anyone is ever interested in that, the Splunk Trust, you generally have to be active in 2 sections or providing some sort of element to the community via 2 different ways. You could run a user group like us. You could develop apps and put them on Splunk base. You can be active in the Slack community. You can also be active on answers.splunk.com, which is where I'm very active at the moment. I have email notifications telling me when people ask questions about SOAR, because I really like to answer them. So if anyone is ever interested, you get free ticket to Splunk Conf every year. You get 5 free credits for 5 days worth of credits for training as well for free. You get additional Splunk Trust user groups that they host, and obviously access to some cooler stuff as well if you want to. So yeah, just something to give you an idea of if you wanted to aim for that. It's not too hard. You just need to get involved.
Yeah. Well, judging by the checking list, I'm pretty sure there's a Splunk trustee in the YouTube channel watching it right now.
Oh, cool.
So yeah.
Come and join us.
Yeah. So I think that's it for us. So we're just going to rattle through any further questions.
I mean, I would say that they didn't like my. I wanted a T-shirt that said "for sore eyes only," which is like my bot's team name. But yeah, I did ping marketing and Splunk. So if there is a Splunker on, could you push that for me. But otherwise, let's just get through the last few slides. Yeah.
So we're like 30 seconds ahead of the actual stream. So I've typed in asking for any questions just now. I'm gonna give it a minute from now, which will realistically actually be like a
Should
minute
give
and
it
a half
30 seconds or so. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine.
Yeah, so trying to actually think about what's actually happened in Splunk since we've last been here, because it's been about 119 days since we've had a user group. There is the big announcement, which I don't know much about. Big C, big ISCO.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'd be confused for a second. Like, what sea are you talking about? Atlantic?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, it's public knowledge, the Cisco acquisition, right? I mean, if you want my viewpoint on it, it's a good thing. If you want my viewpoint on the impact, we won't see any impact, I don't think, for at least another 12 to 18 months. The deal isn't even closing for another 12 months-ish.
Yeah.
And usually these things take 3 years-ish to kind of come to any, amalgamation. I guess my perspective, the only thing I hope is that they do what they do with all of their acquisitions at the moment and leave them alone, as in let them remain as Splunk rather than Splunk, a Cisco company. So we'll see. But yeah, I think it can only be good. Some people will leave because of it. But more people might come because obviously Cisco are a powerhouse in their area of operations, and I think adding Splunk to that portfolio is only going to enhance it. So,
I mean, if they make a universal forwarder for Eastream, I'll be happy.
Eastream, geez, yeah, that thing. Oh, I remember onboarding that. That is not fun.
We do have one question, but I think I did spot in my emails that ITSI, there's a version getting deprecated soon. So if anyone's actually using ITSI, just check for any correspondence with Splunk saying if your product's under risk of not being in support anymore, and try to upgrade to the latest versions where possible. There's also been a bunch of security advisories recently. One using XLST, which I almost got a job doing about a decade ago.
Yeah.
I would have been bored out of my mind doing that. But a misconfigured file could lead into root access or whatever. So yeah, keep reading advisories, try patching, try getting around disabling components that require that could be exploited, but try patching to the latest versions. I know it's not quick. I don't think where I work, we can patch as quickly as we probably need to.
There's probably a bigger process around that. What was the chat question?
Yeah. Do you want to swap?
Oh, was it aimed at me? Was it?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
So fantastisch. Let's go. So Peter L asks.
Oh, hello, Peter.
Yeah,
I know Peter.
if you're already using SOAR and triaging SOAR, I'm trying to understand what key things Mission Control brings to the table.
Wow. At the moment, totally honest, not a lot. It is basically an abstract view of SOAR. And again, if you've been using SOAR on-prem for a long time, you'll realize they haven't really done much on the case management side for obvious reasons, because they've been focused on mission control. So I would say that at the moment, not a huge amount. If you're already intrinsically using Splunk SOAR for case management, there's not a lot of benefits that I can see sort of moving over initially, because you're going to have to create a bunch of other automation to link Splunk SOAR and mission control up anyway. But saying that, there are features coming out that will be aimed at mission control. Mission control is their kind of, golden child right now. There is, as far as I'm aware, a roadmap, probably a long one, where ES, mission control, and SOAR, you'll see a lot more of the features become kind of intrinsically linked. So you might find that eventually SOAR does get kind of, amalgamated into some kind of super ES power. But to answer your question, honestly, not a lot of difference. If you've got automation set up right now, you've already got your notables coming in there, you're already doing all that stuff, you'll be aware of the clunkiness of the case management in Splunk SOAR. So mission control is a little bit shinier. But what I would also say is, looking forward, threat intelligence management is going to come into mission control, which is going to be a better version, I understand, than what is in enterprise security right now. It's available if you're in the US regions, just not available in EMEA yet. You can look at the documentation. It is on Splunk docs about the threat intelligence management feature inside mission control.
But again, it's not for us Europeans just yet. So hopefully when that comes out, that will be a good thing. So yeah, not a huge amount. It is a bit shinier. I suspect there's going to be a lot of extra cool things that come out of it at the moment. But if you're already fully embedded in case management and Splunk SOAR, it's not a immediate, let's move to mission control. I personally would probably wait until mission control becomes a little bit more intrinsically linked into the ES and SOAR bit at the moment, is my response. I hope that made sense and answered your question, Peter.
We'll find out in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Right. So next session, we want to try to get back into the flow of things. I know COVID's killed momentum for a lot of user groups. And personally, it's us two producing a lot of the content at the moment. So we're gonna in the new year try to drive for community submissions, like we normally do, but we would really want to have more user involvement, because
I mean, I think in the last 2+ years, I think we only have had one other talker, which was the Algie and John one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's pretty much been me and you providing the content for this group for a while. So again, look, if there's anything, and also like, I know whatever you think, it's like it's hard to come up with the content when you've obviously got busy lives as well. So it's also a shout out to anyone watching. If there is something you want to see in a future user group, we're happy to take recommendations. And of course, I know quite a bit about Splunk and SOAR. Andrew knows a lot about Splunk. So we'll always be able to come up with something if you give us a guide or give us an idea of what you want. But also, as Andrew said, in the new year, we are going to try and push this a bit more, get a little bit more involvement. There is some stuff going on inside of Dharma as well that I'm kind of spearheading, that means hopefully I can get some engineers to also show some cool stuff that, you know, a managed service provider or consultancy can do when it comes to Splunk. But yeah, we will look to start 2024 fresh and with a little bit more vigor, shall we say, when it comes to user group content. Anyway, we'll still hold them every 2 to 3 months generally is the normal cadence, and we'll try not to get deactivated again.
Yeah.
That's the main thing.
There were a lot of deactivations, and I think I saw, like, while I was up presenting, someone deleted the user group leaders channel in Slack. So let's see what's going to happen.
Well, yeah, bear in mind it's all well, the Splunk Trust has all changed hands and stuff. It's no longer Jason either; it's Renee now as well. So
yeah,
there's a lot of change in Splunk, I imagine, especially after the acquisition, etc. as well. So
anyway, so please get involved. We've got the user group page, which hopefully everyone's managed to find their way to live, but it exists. It didn't exist for like 5 hours. It was deactivated. We got it back. We've got a LinkedIn page. Please join. I think it's private with membership.
You have to be approved. You
have to be approved.
We do keep an eye on it though, but we get a lot of chances and a lot of like people trying to flog us Splunk consultants or Splunk training. So yeah. If you can add I don't know if you can add a note to it or not, but if you can make yourself appear a bit more human than some of these people do, then please do, and we'll happily accept you into the group.
Yeah. I don't know if I want to make it public. Like,
I would.
Maybe I don't know how Yorkshire or London has their.
Maybe we'll consult with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, for now it's a closed group. So if you do want to join in, and mainly it's just to get notification of new events, which you get if you signed up to us anyway. But again, hopefully in the new year we might look to leverage it a bit more and feed some little nuggets of information here and there as well.
And even though it does say Edinburgh, I sort of want Scotland to be sort of involved, because it will just be the closest user group to you, unless you happen to live in Berwick and you're actually close to York somehow. I don't know. I don't know how that works.
But 62 threes, but yeah.
Yeah.
Although actually no, Berwick would be a couple of hours to York.
There's the Slack channel that we mentioned. We do have an Edinburgh channel. It's not that active. Should get it a bit more active.
But you can find tons of stuff in that Slack group, and I'm pretty sure, Peter, you're already on the user groups one for SOAR, I think. Anyway, so yeah. And also there's our email addresses at the bottom too. So again, if there is any recommendations, obviously, any feedback, nice stuff only, please do feel free to get in touch. Obviously, again, if you're on Slack channel as well, I'm on there under Phantom. So if you feel like, pinging me for something, then please do.
And I think that's it.
Yeah.
So thanks for attending live. We'll get it we'll try to get this more coherent for the next session.
That was coherent.
I was a bit rambly.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
I've had one non-alcoholic drink today because it was Christmas sort of drinks. But yeah.
Right. Well, obviously we won't see you or hear from you. So have a good holiday season, everybody. Whichever one you have. Thank you.